Welcome into another episode of the Coyotes Corner podcast with Dave Vest. I'm Luke Lapinski. It is late August, very early September, depending when we post this.
Right. Well said.
Thank you. It was very wordy for a very simple point. Dave, how many times have we done podcasts this summer, do you think? 5, 6, maybe?
I was going to say 6, perhaps 7.
Pretty busy summer, specifically for this team.
Yes.
And I remember doing the first one of the summer talking about how there's really, if you break down all these days and you count the playoffs and the awards show and the World Cup and all that stuff, there's basically like an 8-day off season. Well, now it's pretty much literally an 8-day off season as far as what's left, because the camp dates have been released.
Yes.
Which is like a holiday in my house, basically. September 16th, just over 2 weeks away, rookie camp begins, and then September 23rd, Coyotes' official training camp begins. And rookie camp this year, specifically for this team, is almost like training camp, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of players to watch that first week when it's just the rookies and the prospects on the ice. Should mention that the rookies are reporting on the 16th. The first skate for the rookies, Saturday the 17th.
Yes.
Of course, fans are, as always, encouraged to attend. It's here at Gila River Arena. The exact times will be released later, but it's a Saturday, and it's a great way to kick off the season. Come out and watch the rookies play on a Saturday afternoon, and then the fans are encouraged to come to every training camp practice, rookies and vets.
There's a lot of compelling storylines this year. I guess starting with the rookies, just the simple fact that there are players that are going to be in that camp that are going to be asked to come back for training camp, obviously, a week later. They have a very real shot of making this team. And there's a lot of players in that rookie camp that we're probably going to see at the NHL level within the next year or 2 or 3. So there's a lot on the line in that rookie camp. It's not just those guys getting out there on the ice and kind of warming up. There's a lot of guys that feel like they're playing for jobs this year. And there's only so many spots, but there's a lot of talent.
There's 2 guys that jump out to me that all eyes will be
Dave Vest
on.
and Luke Lapinski.
Myself. Well,
Yes.
No, not you. I was thinking of someone else. But
that's
as
fair.
far as players,
Oh, okay.
Dylan Strome
Yes.
and Christian Dvorak. Dylan Strome, obviously the 3rd overall pick in the draft last year, not this year. And Christian Dvorak, who was just an amazing player in the OHL this year for the London Knights. He was co-captain of that team. They went on and won the Memorial Cup. Some would argue that Christian Dvorak scored the game-winning goal in the Memorial Cup.
It was either him or Tkachuk.
He
Tkachuk
wasn't
got credited with it, but yeah.
But I think if you look at the film real closely, you'll see that he deflected it in. Regardless, Christian Dvorak had a great year in junior hockey, and the vibe around here and everyone talking in the hallway about players to watch from that crop of rookies and prospects, it's those 2, Strome, Dvorak.
Yeah, there's Dvorak specifically, just because we have talked about Strome in the past, and I think the way that the roster is currently constructed, there is a very clear opening for Dylan Strome. Now, he's still very young. He's just drafted 1 season ago, basically 2 drafts ago, but one year and 2 months ago. So if he doesn't make the team, it's not a huge setback, but there is a spot there for him right now to take. And so obviously he is storyline number 1 in I think most people's books. But Christian Dvorak he's improved so much since they've drafted him. And it's not like they took him in the 7th round, they took him in the 2nd, but it's impressive how much he has improved in the short time since they've taken him.
Well, when he was drafted, he was coming off a season where he had suffered a serious knee injury.
Yeah.
So he didn't play a full season leading up to the draft, and evidently, that led to a lot of doubt on draft day. The Coyotes clearly were willing to take a shot that Christian Dvorak not only would return to his form before he was injured, but would escalate his game, which he clearly has done.
I mean, if he was, I guess it's not fair to make this comparison, but if he was available in this past summer's draft, I mean, he would have been a top 10 pick for sure, if not a top 5. So the fact that they got that in the 2nd round a couple of years ago is it's phenomenal. And those aren't the only 2 players to watch. I think there's a lot of other guys that there's a group of players that could feasibly sneak onto this team. Not all of them, but maybe one.
Name some names.
Tyler Gaudette and Laurent Dauphin are 2 guys we're going to be watching closely because there could be an opening on the 3rd or 4th line for one of them. And just the position and style that they play, there could be an opening for either of them. But I mean, if you want me to name names, Brandon Perlini, Lawson Crouse now. I mean, there's other guys I'm watching that don't expect to make the team just yet, but Jacob Chikrin's somebody that every time that guy's on the ice right now, I want to see it because I want to see how quickly he evolves his game. He's obviously a huge part of this team's future on the blue line. And this is a great problem to have with the Coyotes. I could sit here and name 12 guys and forget somebody of major importance.
Christian Fischer.
Christian Fischer is another one.
He's somebody that I can tell you from being in this building all summer long, he is held in very high regard among the prospects. He doesn't get a lot of attention in the media, but I can tell you they're very high on him and eager to see what he can do in training camp.
He's been one of my favorite prospects because the Coyotes, we saw it with Max Domi and Anthony Duclair coming up last year. A lot of speed there, and they've got a lot of these other speed guys. Clayton Keller is a speed guy. There's a lot of those players in the system. Brendan Perlini can skate really fast. Dvorak, same thing. But Fischer is so unique from every other prospect they really have. He's just a big physical winger that, there's so many different numbers. I want to say he had 40 goals last year in the OHL. It was right around 40 goals. I mean, so now you've got this big physical presence that does all these other things and then also puts the puck in basically every other game. There's not a lot of prospects like that in the NHL, but specifically in the Coyotes prospect pool, he's kind of unique from everybody else. And he looks like he's 30 and he's been playing in the league for 10 years already.
All right, so we've mentioned a number of the prospects we'll be watching when they take the ice for the first time on the 17th of September, 23rd of September, the veterans. In past podcasts, we've talked about the new faces on this team, but since we last talked to our audience, a couple of players to name and discuss. The first name on that list that is scribbled in my handwriting. Can you read it?
No, I can't, and you've already read it to me. And also, I should just point out to the listeners, you put together a show rundown for the show, which I thought was very nice.
Thank you.
And you wrote it all out of order.
I know.
Like on purpose, almost.
Yeah, and I can see we've already skipped over a topic I wanted to talk about.
We'll get to that at the end, because now it would just be awkward, like this whole conversation. I'm assuming you're going in the direction of Radim Vrbata.
Correct.
Who is back with the Arizona Coyotes for the third time.
Yes.
And
what do you think?
I love it. I think I would assume you were kind of hearing rumblings for a while, too, that there was a good chance that was going to happen. When I first heard that, look, anybody, even if you hadn't heard anything, you could piece together that the Coyotes needed a right wing, and he was going to be available this summer, so there was at least going to be some conversations. But when I first heard that there was a pretty real possibility, really a couple months ago, I loved it then. And you never know, because there's other teams that wanted Radim Vrbata, obviously, too. But, that's a guy that I think you can pencil him in for 20 goals at least. I really believe that. And you can never predict injury, but just assuming he plays 82 games on this team, I think he's a 20 to 25 goal scorer at least.
And he's very excited to be back, as he told all of us. He never really wanted to leave. He became a free agent and got that terrific contract from the Canucks. He went up there for 2 years.
Yes.
First year, great.
31 goals.
Played with the Sedin Twins. Last year, did not play with the Sedin Twins.
Yeah, that's the thing people have to remember when they look at that, because I was getting a lot of interaction from people that, were excited to have Vrbata back, but kind of thought it was more of like a sentimental move. He's mid-30s. He can still play hockey. He's just not a 50-year-old that they brought back. And when you look at his numbers from last year, you have to take it with a grain of salt that Vancouver's in a weird spot, and they're trying to juggle things around and figure out what they have. And I don't understand why you would have Vrbata and not play him with the Sedins, but whatever, that's their business. All that really matters for the purposes of what we're talking about is when you look at his numbers from last year, take those with a grain of salt, because he's not going to be playing on the Coyotes' third or fourth line or whatever. And even that, the Coyotes' third line is much different than Vancouver's third line was. He's going to be in a position to succeed, and much like all the fans here know what sort of position Vrbata needs to be in to get the most out of him, Dave Tippett obviously does too.
Put your coaching hat on.
Okay.
Take off that other bonnet you're wearing.
Well, I had a sombrero, but I gave it away when I walked in.
Where do you see him playing, or better yet, with whom do you see him playing? Obviously, Marty Hansel is the answer that makes the most sense, at least.
Now, don't influence my answer or anything.
Okay, go ahead.
That's a great question. Where do you see him playing? The correct answer is Marty Hansel.
Well, I wanted to give you a fighting chance to get it right.
Well, then I'll go with the other player I could see on that line, and my immediate thought when that signing was announced was Max Domi. It just makes so much sense.
You're correct. Yeah. I don't have any type of sound effect or an audio smiley face.
Can you just sing like a song to me?
Well,
from your library of songs that you sing?
But if you remember, Radim has had his best success here with the Coyotes.
Yes.
And perhaps his greatest time here.
Definitely.
His most productive was when he was playing with Marty Hansel and Ray
Whitney. Yep.
Max Domi, Ray Whitney, same type of player.
I feel like a lot of people, not to minimize the point you just made, but I feel like a lot of people made that connection a year ago when Max first started playing of, hey, if Vrbata was here, this would be very similar to just like the next generation of Ray Whitney. I mean, Max Domi, and you talked to Max, and I remember talking to him after, I think it was one of the game where he had the hat trick, and he's like, I'm not really a shooter, I'm more of a passer. And I'm just looking around like he just scored 3 goals in an NHL game. But that is his mentality. He likes to pass first. Remember the iconic Shane Doan goal this year where Doan passes off to Domi, and he's like, nope, you're scoring this one, big guy. He's a pass-first playmaking player, which is exactly the other piece to the puzzle when you have Radim Vrbata. If you're not gonna try and get the most out of Vrbata, why have him? The Coyotes know what he can do and what position to put him in to do it. And they have, even if it's not Domi, they have other playmakers, but Domi just certainly seems like the most sense to at least start him with him.
Okay, next on the list, Lawson Crouse.
Yeah, so when we talked about Christian Fischer, Lawson Crouse is kind of similar. That he's finally a second prospect in the system that's kind of like somewhat similar to Christian Fischer. Number 11 pick 2 years ago in the draft. He was the Florida Panthers' top prospect. I don't think there's any debate over that.
And he comes to the Coyotes via trade with the Panthers last week, along with Dave Boland, who is injured and will likely not play for the Coyotes, but they'll take on his cap hit. And they send to Florida a couple of draft picks, conditional on how much Crouse plays for the Coyotes.
Yeah, this is just... You can't say enough about what John Chaika and this front office has done this summer, and I know a lot of people are talking about how impressive of a job he's done and the rest of the front office, but to see that sort of opportunity, when you start to look really close at Florida's contract situation, you get a better feel for why Lawson Crouse was traded. I'm sure you're the same way. I have a lot of friends around town that are sports fans that don't follow hockey as closely as you and I do, and so their initial reaction was, how did they just get a guy that was the number 11 pick 12 months ago? Does Florida, have they soured on Lawson Crouse? That is not the case. If you've heard any of Florida's GM, their assistant GM, I heard an interview with the day that happened. He sounded like he wanted Lawson Crouse back already, and that was an hour later. The situation is Florida needed money, and for other players that are already on the team, and Chaika swooped in and he's like, hey, we can help you out, but you're going to give us your best prospect.
And he was insistent on that.
Yes.
There was no negotiating. It was Lawson Crouse or this deal's not happening.
Because he had all the leverage. And he had the leverage, and he stepped in. And look, I know the storyline going into the summer was, well, he's so young, he's going to have to deal with all these experienced GMs. That's a pretty savvy move right there, and it's the second time he's done it this summer.
Little background on Lawson Crouse. As you mentioned, he was the 11th overall pick last year. He played for Team Canada at the World Junior Championship, not last year, the year before, when they won the gold in Toronto. And Max Domi and Anthony Duclair were on that team. They know Lawson Crouse very well, and both very excited that he's now part of the same organization.
I want to say he's worked out with Dylan Strome too. Or
go ahead, because it's true.
Okay, and there was a tournament that happened about a week or two ago that I want to say those two were on the same team. They were both in the tournament, so either way, he has been working out with them.
They're all buddies.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, this team is starting to collect or gather or stockpile, whatever word you want to use.
I think stockpile is the best word. It's absurd that they add Lawson Crouse to the group they already had.
These very talented young players who all know and like each other and want to play together.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is like the blueprint for how to do it, and it's not easy to do. And certainly, a lot of things had to fall in place for the Coyotes to be able to do this. You have to draft well. I mean, they had a couple rough years in there, so they made the most of it and got the right prospects in the draft. Even. It's just it is impressive how they, like you said, have gotten not only high-end players, but high-end players who know each other and feasibly work well together. I mean, Max Domi and Anthony Duclair, before they ever stepped on the ice together as Coyotes, every hockey fan in North America knew that they worked really well together. That's a nice little bonus that you don't normally get, and that's so huge in hockey. I mean, this isn't baseball where it's like, yeah, I kind of know that guy. What does it really matter? You have to have that chemistry on the ice.
Great point, Luke.
Thank you, Dave.
I've been waiting many, many podcasts to say that.
I've been waiting many, many podcasts to hear it from you.
Okay, next on the list, I'm going to take over reading the list because even I'm having trouble reading the writing.
Your writing, I should point out.
And more importantly, the logic that's on the board.
Oh, yeah, no, I gave up on that a while. This looks like a Wildcat NFL play.
Okay, so in terms of more news.
Yes.
Of course, Coyotes making huge news last week with the announcement of Dawn Braid as the team's full-time skating coach. It's a historic move because Dawn's believed to be the first female to hold a full-time coaching job with an NHL team.
Yeah, I think people that are familiar with the world of hockey already knew her name, certainly, and she's done work with the Coyotes before. This isn't some stranger coming in that has a great reputation, but maybe the Coyotes haven't worked with her. She's familiar with a lot of the players that you're talking about.
Connor Murphy she works with.
Yep.
Max Domi.
They all have great things to say about her. Max Domi's a fantastic skater. Not that Connor Murphy isn't, but Max Domi's one of the potentially elite skaters in this league.
Connor told me in an interview last week that she reconstructed how he skates backwards, and he apparently has improved greatly in his own words.
How much does that sentence say about the situation that Connor Murphy's already having success at the NHL level? His dad played in the NHL. His dad has a coaching gig in the NHL. Connor Murphy's grown up around hockey, and he was having success. And he was still willing, based on just word of mouth, basically, among other players and people that he's either played with or against, to let her reconstruct how he skates backwards. That says something about the reputation she's built. It's not just Coyotes she's worked with. She's worked with a lot of really great players around the league. John Tavares, pretty decent player.
Right.
I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, and I think it's a great move for any team to bring in such a well-revered skating coach. But the two things I really liked about this move, one, as you mentioned, the first female full-time coach in the NHL, but that's not why the Coyotes did it. That's what I really like. When you hear the quotes from John Chaika and just knowing the reasoning around here, they got her because she's the most qualified for the job they were looking for. That's a cool thing. It's a great story, and I'm glad that other people outside of this building are running with that story because, we need to see more of that. But that's not why they hired her, and that, to me, is the best part about it. The second thing is, it would have been a great fit, I think, for any team, but specifically a team with young players, because you can draft all these prospects, and we can talk about them all day. If you can't develop your young players, what's the point of having them?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Dawn will be with the team on a full-time basis, as we said. She'll be at practices here in Glendale, available to the players afterward. When the Coyotes are out of town and the Tucson Roadrunners are in town, she'll be down there. So
that makes even more sense.
She'll be based here in Arizona and working with Coyotes players from both levels.
Yeah.
It's a great hire.
I feel like it's one of those things that, on the one hand, I want to say it's such an innovative move and it's such cutting edge move by the Coyotes, but it's one of those things that now when you look at it, you're like, this makes so much sense. Why isn't every team doing this? Skating is one of those things that I feel like it's oddly almost overlooked, because the thought is, oh yeah, this guy got drafted in the NHL. He just scored 50 goals at the OHL. He must be great at skating. Whatever. Look at his hands. Well, you got to be able to skate at the NHL level at a whole different level than even the OHL.
Mike Van Ryn was hired as development coach. He comes in to kind of fill Steve Sullivan's job. Steve was promoted. And last but not least, Steve Potvin was hired as skills coach. And I just had the honor of speaking to Steve on the phone. He's very excited about it. He has a history here in Arizona. He was a coach with the junior Coyotes.
Yeah.
He played for the Arizona Sundogs.
There you go.
The last stop on his playing career about 5-6 years ago.
Hockey is a very small world. It absolutely is.
Okay.
So now should we get to your second point, now that we've done 6 of them? All right. Single game tickets are
now available.
Okay. I love it when you finish my sentences.
Now,
it feels like we're in sync.
So yeah, the tickets for the games played, I believe, up until the end of December, early January.
Okay.
The second half of the season tickets, they'll be made available at a later time. But if fans want to start planning now to come out to single games for the first 3 months of the season, they can do so. And if not, if you can't come to the game, guess how many games are on TV this year?
That would be all of them, Dave.
Very good.
And you should also listen to the radio at the same time, however you want to do that. But yes, every game is on TV. Every single game.
Spoken like a true radio man.
I got to get a plug in there. Or at least listen to the post-game show on the radio. 81 games on Fox Sports. And then the one game that isn't on Fox Sports, nationally televised, against the San Jose Sharks, who just happened to win the Western Conference last year.
November the 1st, here at Gila River Arena, nationally televised game.
Dave, we're at that point of the year where Christmas is 4 months away. This is that point where everything moves quickly. Football has already started. Training camp has started. Final preseason game is tomorrow as we're recording this for the Cardinals. We're at that point where everything starts to move quickly, which means when we say training camp's opening in 16 days from when we're recording this, it's going to go by like that. I had just snapped my fingers, just not into the microphone. So just know that happened. It's coming up. So get ready. So like you said, if you can't get to any of those first few games or whatever, get ready to watch them on TV. But after you watch them on TV, you're going to want to buy some single game tickets, because the promise this team showed last year, specifically in the first half of the season, it's elevated this year. It really is. And you've got so much more competition this year than you even had last year. You've got so many of these young guys pushing each other for jobs. Absolutely.
It's going to be fun to watch, and it goes from 0 to 100 with the snap of a finger. As you said, the players skate for the first time, the veterans, on the 23rd. They have a game on the 26th.
Yeah, training camp in hockey is not like training camp in football, where it's like, oh, we're going to work out for a few weeks. You hit the ice, all right, you have a game tomorrow in Calgary or wherever.
And this year, we need to talk about the wrinkle to the preseason, the World Cup of
This
hockey.
isn't on your board? Oh, it is. Okay.
It is on the board.
That's that said?
See it?
It looks like an eye test. Yes, the World Cup of Hockey camp starts next week.
Yes, the 4th of September. So that does affect the Coyotes because they have a handful of players, head coach Dave Tippett and video coach Steve Peters, all participating. Let's break it down. Marty Hansel, Zbigniew Michalek are playing for Team Czech Republic, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson is playing for Team Sweden. Tobias Rieder is playing for Team Europe, and Dave Tippett and Steve Peters are coaching Team North America, which is another word for the youngsters team.
Yeah, basically the 23 and under team, which you look at that you look at certain players around the league and you're like, how did that guy not make the team? Like he's at 23 or under and he's going to be an all-star in 2 years. Then you look at the lineup and you realize they could have probably made 2 teams and still had good players left out. To me, that's the team I really want to watch. It's going to be a fun tournament because they used to do the World Cup of Hockey, but it wasn't set up quite like this. So there are those wrinkles with Team Europe and Team North America. Certainly with the ties to Dave Tippett and Steve Peters, that makes Team North America that much more of kind of like a rooting interest. But really, just to see all those players together, they're either going to struggle because all these other teams are more experienced, or they're just going to run right over teams.
Are you excited to watch this?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I will be watching it in 2 weeks.
The games start on the 17th of September?
Yes.
On ESPN.
Yes.
ESPN has gotten involved with the World Cup of Hockey.
Which I like that for a lot of reasons,
It's
too.
a big deal. So fans wanting to see some of the Coyotes play before the season starts will get their chance at the World Cup of Hockey.
I'll also say this, too. It's good to have some players over there. Obviously, you want that representation. And, for a guy like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, that's basically his training camp, and that's great. There are some teams in this league that have 10, 12, 14, 15 players playing over there. I wouldn't want that. That's too many of your players away from kind of like your regular training camp to start things off. I think the Coyotes were able to slide into a position with pretty good balance right there. It's a good setup. It's a good setup for the league in general, but I think the Coyotes kind of benefit from it as well.
All right. What do you think?
I would give this podcast an A+.
Nice.
If that's what you're asking me.
I am.
All right. So we're going to do this again probably in, 2 weeks, right on the eve of training camp.
I would think very close to the start of training camp, you and I should get together and give the fans a heads up of what's to come, recapping the dates and such. The times will be official by then. We'll have the rosters. We'll be able to talk in depth about the groups, who's playing with who at training camp. It should be a fun podcast with a lot of information.
The Coyotes successfully made so much news over the summer that we were able to do this podcast consistently, basically every 2 or 3 weeks, and never struggled for content. So, Dave, thank you very much. Thanks to executive producer Doug Cannon. And do you have anything else random you want to write on your whiteboard that I won't be able to read? I think I see your bank code up there. Should I give that out to the listeners?
It's Bosco.
All right. I'm Luke Lapinski. Thanks for listening to the Coyotes Corner podcast.